It would be known as Black Saturday.
The spot fires crossed the road.
I want you out of that area. We have a spot fire south at the moment, which has 2 helicopters on it. Strike time about to hit.
And it would rewrite the record books.
We're in uncharted territory and our weather conditions are as bad as they can get. This was a day well beyond anything that anybody had ever had or predicted.
Something happened that day.
It's changing.
I've been in meteorology for nearly 40 years now. I've never seen fires move like that.
There it comes.
It turned Australia's bushland into a hell on earth.
It was like someone turned a volcano on its side and was shooting it at you.
Even the best prepared couldn't escape.
It has been completely vaporised, and you get to realise that it was impossible to get out for the people.
More than 170 people lost their lives when nature turned terrifying. But the powerful forces unleashed that day were forged well before Black Saturday. They were born in the skies days, weeks, and months before. This is the story of weather at its deadliest.
Did you get an update on the weather forecast?
Rural Victoria attracts all sorts of people. Some work the land, while others just enjoy the close-knit towns and communities. People have set up homes in the beautiful mountains and fertile grasslands. It's a little piece of paradise until the weather turns.
I look at the weather every day and I'm fully aware of just how quickly the weather can go wrong, how severe weather conditions can develop very, very quickly. But really, I don't think anything could have prepared me for the sheer ferocity of the weather that unfolded over the Black Saturday bushfires, and really just what a terrible event had unfolded for Australia.
Sunday morning, February the 8th, 2009. The horror of the night before, one of the most deadly in Australia's history, is slowly dawning.
I'd been following the weather all day on Saturday, but when I woke up on Sunday, I couldn't believe what had happened.
The story kept revealing itself all day and into the night, and then continued into the Monday morning.
As reports filter in, it seems the impossible has happened. Whole towns have vanished, their residents missing. Fire has wiped out entire communities north of Melbourne.
Kinglake in central Victoria was one of the worst areas to be hit.
It will be days before the devastating toll is realised. More than 170 confirmed deaths, more than 7,000 homeless. 400,000 hectares scorched.
Well, everybody's asking how could these terrible events have taken place? And really, to answer that, you've got to step back in time, look at the events that led up to Black Saturday and place that in the context of Victoria's unique meteorological conditions. Australia's the driest inhabited continent. In particular, Victoria. Victoria stands out as one of the 3 most bushfire-prone areas in the world. The other 2 are the French Riviera, and we've also got California in the United States.
Well, it's my view that it is the world's worst bushfire zone in terms of the impact of fire upon people and on populations. In the last 100 years or so, up to Black Saturday, There have been about 600 bushfire deaths in Australia in 100 years. 400 of those have been in Victoria.
Fire scientist David Packham knows Victoria's deadly weather firsthand. It almost took his life in 1983 during the notorious Ash Wednesday fires.
Well, on Ash Wednesday, our house was burnt over. The flames were over the top of the roof, and the intensity was such that it was a mud brick house. Some of the raw mud brick on the outside was actually fired to red brick, and because we had 4 good, able-bodied people inside who were working very hard to stop things burning, and we succeeded.
Until now, Ash Wednesday was Australia's darkest day, and in this tragedy there were clues to what would happen 26 years later. The same forces were at work, Victoria's lethal weather patterns.
It's one factor that makes the region so dangerous are the hot northerly winds we often get ahead of cold frontal systems, and it's this change in wind direction that can also add a lethal dimension to the fires.
In certain weather cycles, Victoria is bombarded by hot winds blowing down from Australia's desert interior. Fires start and then take a catastrophic turn when cold fronts move in at 90 degrees from the southwest. This instantly creates a giant fire front.
The faster the wind, the narrower the fire, as it is on the northwest spread, and then the change comes from the southwest, and suddenly you have got a long fire front. And in Ash Wednesday, for example, 46 of the 47 people who died in Victoria died on the passage of the front of the wind change or soon after.
Ash Wednesday was created by the perfect firestorm. It wouldn't be the last, and it wasn't the first.
When you look at the history of Australian bushfires, the really worst ones, the big one, of course, up until this particular event, was the so-called Black Friday bushfires of 1939. And it was a very similar roll-up to what we've just seen. Some of those record temperatures still stand, and then the fires erupted on the 13th, Friday the 13th of January 1939.
Black Friday claimed 71 lives. Again, hot northerly winds started the fire in one direction, only to be quickly overtaken by cool, fast winds from the southwest. It was impossible to fight and too fast to outrun. Many Australians hoped it would never, could never happen again. But weather experts knew differently. They knew Victoria's climate and vegetation could again create the perfect firestorm. It was unthinkable, but it was possible. With a dark history of megafires, the end of 2008 is ringing alarm bells for meteorologists like Dick Whittaker and Jane Bunn.
By the end of 2008, the situation had certainly looked bad. Things were very, very dry and very hot across southeastern Australia, including Victoria, and the actual fire situation was certainly starting to ramp up.
For Victoria, what a tough day. It is going to be a tough week.
We were coming off the back of 12 very dry years in Victoria. Melbourne had just endured their second driest January ever, and were in one of their driest spells with no rain at all.
A lot of this seems to be due to the fact that cold fronts that normally bring rain, particularly during the winter months, had slipped further to the south, and this in fact has been linked by some climatologists with climate change. We've seen green paddocks turn to the colour of straw, and we're also seeing the Australian bushland under considerable heat and dryness stress, dropping more leaves to the forest floor and increasing the fuel load.
It seems the drought will last forever. Then finally, some good rain.
Leading up to the bushfires, strangely enough, we saw some good rainfall across parts of South Australia and Victoria. And that stimulated the undergrowth, and there was a heavy increase in the fuel load.
Victoria's fuel load is naturally volatile, especially the native gums. They fuel the biggest and fastest blazes, known as mega fires.
Well, the eucalypt is pretty well designed for burning. The bark on the trees burns very well. Some eucalypt trees, the bark will catch a light and burn like a cigar and start fires up to 30 kilometres ahead. Then we've got all the oils that are in the leaves themselves, which adds to the volatile mix. We would see in those forests probably in the vicinity of 50 tonne per hectare of fine fuel being available to burn. And then there's all the woody material that's available, and that could be 200-300 tonne per hectare of woody material.
The brief rains at the end of 2008 simply added more fuel. It stimulated growth that soon died when another hot spell set in.
Well, the good rains we saw across many parts of Victoria during December abruptly turned off during January and February and were replaced by almost completely dry conditions, rocketing temperatures, and everything dried out. It was a disaster just waiting to happen.
A perfect storm of heat, low humidity and strong winds had created both the Black Friday and Ash Wednesday fires. And by early February 2009, it seems the weather is conspiring again.
Yes, all of the ingredients are very reminiscent of the Black Friday bushfires and Ash Wednesday. It's been a horrible lead up to summer. We've had virtually no rain, but then we had a little burst during December. That promoted growth, and now a heat wave like this drying out the vegetation. Wind like this and pure sunshine evaporates about 10 up to 15 millimetres of moisture per 24 hours. This is going to be a very tough end to summer 2009.
We saw hot, dry, northwesterly winds pouring down from Central Australia right across Victoria. They were ahead of this cold front approaching from the Bight and a blocking high out in the Tasman Sea. These hot, dry winds really brought temperatures right up, humidity's down. They turned Victoria into basically a boiling pot.
A high-pressure system sitting in the Tasman Sea, that was what was responsible for most of the heat. And it didn't move. We had it there for several weeks at a time, making this prolonged heat wave.
In the week before the fires, we saw an unprecedented heat wave start rolling across southeastern Australia. We saw a big spike in heat-related deaths amongst the population, record demand in energy, and also record temperatures spreading right across many parts of South Australia and Victoria.
Being in Melbourne was extraordinary. You could walk along the southern side of a building in the shade and out of the wind, but you'd come around the corner and the wind would hit you like a hairdryer switched on extreme, and the air was so hot and dry it felt like it was burning your eyeballs.
Experts fear the worst. The Country Fire Authority and its thousands of paid and volunteer firefighters are on high alert. At CFA headquarters, just 3 days before Black Saturday, one man is feeling the heat more than most. Authority Chief Officer Russell Rees.
Good morning, everybody. On Wednesday night, I looked at the forecast and, to be blunt, I couldn't believe the numbers.
The veteran firefighter is looking at Victoria's Fire Danger Index, a single number that sums up fire risk by combining temperature, wind speed, humidity and fuel load.
The normal fire danger index is designed to go from 0 to 100. We had across the state 14 locations that were above 100, some into the 200s.
After a string of 40-degree days, when many think it can't get any hotter, it does.
As soon as the sun cracked the horizon, it was 34 degrees and it's just been rising ever since. It's just basically horrible.
We're coming to you live on the Weather Channel with the news that we have literally just broken this Melbourne heatwave record in the last few minutes. Jane.
That's right, it is confirmed. We're now on 43.1 degrees. Melburnians have had to endure 3 days in a row over 43 degrees. Now, this is unprecedented in Melbourne's history, and that goes back over 150 years.
Melbourne's temperature reached 46.4 degrees, which was a new record. That broke the 1939 record set on Black Friday.
60 kilometres north of Melbourne, at the small settlement of Reedy Creek, Liam Sheehan's family are bracing themselves. They know the weather is creating potentially lethal conditions. The only thing missing now is a flame.
If you've got a fuel source, you've got oxygen, you've got heat, and then some ignition source, you're going to have a fire.
Liam and his family will soon be fighting for their lives. Just 20 kilometres away at St Andrews, Jim Baruta makes his preparations. He has a fire bunker dug into the mountainside. It's built with tons of concrete and steel.
I always knew that I needed something that if we were there, my family and I, we needed to go into something that we could shelter from a fire, you know, and like it's always in the back of our mind.
An entire state is on edge. Those who know, meteorologists, fire scientists and firefighters, believe the weather has made catastrophe almost inevitable.
If last week didn't stuff the fuel in the state of Victoria, nothing ever will.
On Friday, February the 6th, CFA's Chief Officer Russell Rees gives a briefing he's never given before.
So our weather situation is we're in uncharted territory and our weather conditions are as bad as they can get. Hot northerly winds, low humidity, strong winds and a southwesterly wind change with no rain. This was a day well beyond anything that anybody had ever had or predicted, and that this was well beyond an Ash Wednesday type condition.
Until now, the deadly weather has held its fire. Despite the heat, only 2 small bushfires have broken out and both are under control. But tomorrow, Saturday, February the 7th, weather forecasts predict a cool change might be on the way. To many, it feels like a sign of relief. To those who remember Black Friday and Ash Wednesday, it spells disaster.
It definitely rang alarm bells. You were looking at gusty northerly winds. You were looking at extreme temperatures. Temperatures were forecast well over 40 degrees. You were also looking at the big one, the wind change moving through.
A weather time bomb is about to explode.
A deadly recipe of weather conditions is bringing the heatwave of the century to a climax on the weekend. So far, we've escaped without serious bushfires raging out of control, but now increasing wind will add a lethal element that has authorities on red alert.
As Saturday dawns, in CFA headquarters there's a tense calm and hopes that somehow Victorians may dodge the bullet loaded in the weather's gun.
And the day was actually quite benign, you know, it looked really like I got this feeling maybe we'll get away with this.
Thankfully, there's only one fire on the CFA's radar, east of Melbourne, at Bunyip.
All morning, nothing happened. It just sat there, you know, like this dormant lion just waiting to roar.
But the calm doesn't last for long. By mid-morning, the hot northwesterly winds are getting stronger and temperatures are rising.
Now, the forecast is seeing widespread wind warnings in place. In fact, severe weather warnings for winds gusting between 50 and 100 kilometres an hour. Temperatures are up over 40 degrees for just about the entire state, and there is a total fire ban in place.
It looked like Melbourne would surpass the hottest temperature it had ever recorded. We thought, is that going to be a possibility?
On the day of the fires, the meteorological observations that began pouring in showed that we had reason to be really concerned. We had temperatures developing well in excess of 45 degrees. In fact, Hopetoun in the Mallee district of Victoria peaked at 48.8 degrees, which is the hottest temperature ever recorded in Victoria. We had winds in excess of 100 kilometres per hour. We had humidities below 10%. All of those things were converging to one time, and that, of course, was Black Saturday, and it became clear that a fire disaster was very likely to develop.
Rising heat and winds finally set loose the Bunyip fire.
That fire got up and run and was coming out with a rush.
And soon there are more fires.
Some people call it the witching hour. You know, like all of a sudden it happens. When within a space of 2 or 3 hours, multiple calls start rolling in of new starts.
Authorities are warning that this is extreme danger, and we keep asking everyone to be very vigilant for spot fires, fires on your properties, and all residents to also really try and clear the gutters and get ready for these fire conditions.
40-degree temperatures and roaring hot winds fan any flame into a firestorm.
We knew it was going to be an extreme bushfire day, but once those fires got going, they were just moving with breathtaking speed. I've been in meteorology for nearly 40 years now. I've never seen fires move like that.
And all of a sudden there were fires all across the state. It was as if the state had exploded all at once.
One of the fires starts raging near the town of Kilmore, just a few kilometres from the property of Liam and Dale Sheehan.
Could see this great plume of smoke, and Kiss said there's a fire, so it's probably just a pine forest. Good luck to them, I can't stand pine forest.
Because of the weather on that day, as it was so hot and with that northerly wind behind it, we knew that if they didn't round it up straight away, there was going to be some real problems.
The Kilmore fire is galloping southeast, fanned by the hot desert winds. It's throwing up embers high on convection currents. They're jumping ahead up to 15 kilometres, starting spot fires and extending the front.
We began to receive reports of wind gusts around 110 kilometres an hour, and that's not far off a Category 1 tropical cyclone. And of course those strong winds became a major driver of the bushfires during the afternoon.
The fire started about 8 or 10 kilometres out in that direction out to the west, and over a period of about 3 hours, with fanned by those hot northerly winds, it then got driven south about 20 odd kilometres.
Now, this is not rain that you can see on the radar here. These are the plumes of smoke that are coming up from the bushfires raging across the state.
It was the smoke particles that the radar was picking up. You can see a big plume heading down from the northwest to the southeast. Those strong northerly winds were pushing in that direction.
At 3 p.m, another serious outbreak starts northwest of Marysville. Like the Kilmore fire, it heads southeast, driven by the hot winds. For any fire management, multiple fronts spreading quickly are enough to worry about. But in Victoria, there's the other constant threat, a sudden wind change of 90 degrees.
At the same time, you're monitoring the weather, because the critical aspect of these fires is not just that they're happening, but they're going to have a wind change impact upon them.
What everyone fears next is Victoria's notorious cold front. And just as forecast, it starts moving in late afternoon.
We saw a strong and gusty wind change charge across the state from west to east during the day, affecting the central parts of Victoria during the late afternoon and getting through to the eastern parts later in the evening.
We'll take a look at this change. We can see it's pushed through areas like Portland and Hamilton, Warrnambool, and it's just now arriving in the southern suburbs of Melbourne. Melbourne, after reaching 46.4 degrees earlier, is now sitting on 30 degrees. So people opening up their houses, strong northwesterly winds ahead of them, blowing over the fire areas at the moment, and that's going to be a real problem for firefighters tonight.
We're seeing nature at its worst. It's turning fires into mega fires.
Now, we do have a cold front that is fast approaching the southeast of the country, and what that is going to do is impact the wind direction and change the course of all these fires.
We've got extreme fire weather happening out there now. It's currently impacting fires. What sort of effect will the actual change in wind direction have on the fires?
Well, at the moment, the winds are coming from the northwest, so any fires that you've got burning are moving down into the southeast. We do have a wind change coming, so that means they will turn southwesterly. All of that land that is burnt is going to push that fire straight out in this direction. So anyone who is to the northeast of this, that is a dangerous area, and you should be preparing now.
Two generations of fear is coming to life as the weather repeats its deadly pattern of 1939 and 1983.
Now, residents in these areas should be preparing right at this very moment. Put your bushfire survival plan into gear. Make a decision whether you are going to stay and fight the fire and protect your home or evacuate the area.
Here it comes.
East of the Kilmore fire, Jimbaruta records the devastating force unleashed by the changing winds.
No, it's changing. It's coming towards me. It jumped about 10 kilometres in about 10 minutes. And then from there, when it came towards the front of the house, I had the fire coming up on my right-hand side, all along the ridge. It was burning all the undergrowth. The house on fire next door. The front came over the first hill in the front of us and then just straight up the front across the lawn, and that took about 10 seconds for that half-kilometre rush.
Not far away, the fire front turns on the Sheehan family.
It then blew that whole fire front from there straight back towards us.
And you just knew it was going to hit, and just before it went whoomp, you looked out and you saw this great red thing coming towards you. You thought there was no turning back from that point. There was nothing we could have done, and then you realised how committed we'd become. It just was coming straight at us, and at that point we just knew, I mean, there's no turning back.
Everyone on the eastern side of the old fire front suddenly becomes a potential victim. The speed of the switch catches many off guard. Jimbaruta is one of the lucky ones.
The noise was so loud, it was deafening. It just sounded like 10 jets coming over, and it just wasn't slowing down. It was just getting stronger and stronger. It was searching for oxygen. It was searching for every bit of oxygen it could find, and that's the only thing that was slowing it down.
Major bushfires do have the capacity to create their own weather. Violent updrafts produced by the fires actually suck in air from the outside. You get clouds forming on top of the blaze, which we call pyrocumulus clouds, and you can actually have fire tornadoes that are violently rotating funnels of fire that have the power to knock down trees and power lines. Once the fire gets to these sort of intensities, there's no way of controlling it. The whole thing is in the hands of the weather.
My daughter described it. She said it's like someone turned a volcano on its side and was shooting it at you.
Everything was on fire, it was rolling past me, and then I thought I have to walk back to the shelter where I have a bunker.
Jimbaruta in his bunker and the Sheehan family in their house are somehow surviving hell.
We were subjected to the most horrendous ember attack I've ever seen. And we had embers getting into the house, and our house actually caught fire, at least 8 times inside.
There was flames trying to get in. I had a little hole that's about this big, and I had an extension cord coming in it, and it's about that long through the wall, and it looked like someone was out there with an oxy torch trying to get in.
As the huge new fire front is fanned northeast by the cool change, more communities are now in the line of fire. Kinglake and Marysville further east.
And there were many firefighters from CFA and DSE and Parks Victoria firefighters in that town doing their best, but they were overwhelmed.
Overnight, 2 enormous fire fronts will become one. A mega fire with a speed and ferocity almost impossible to conceive.
If you can imagine the wall of fire moving towards you and take a metre slice of that, then the energy that's coming out of that metre of fire is measured in megawatts.
No one can survive the heat of a 10 megawatt fire. This fire has 10 times more energy, burning at 1200 degrees.
The fires that occurred on Black Saturday, I calculated out at about somewhere between 90 to 100 megawatts per metre at their peak.
Overnight, unimaginable horror approaches the mountain towns of Marysville and Kinglake. The fire accelerates as it races uphill.
Fires are unusual. They're one of the few things that actually go upslope quicker than downslope. For every 10 degrees increase in slope, there's a doubling of the rate of spread of fire up a slope.
Charging through at up to 120 kilometres per hour, the fire sweeps through hilltop settlements.
Clearly the indications are Marysville's suffered late into the Saturday night, and our firefighters have fought valiantly there, and the pre-planning was put into place to make sure our firefighters and as much as possible the community remained safe. I mean, it was a traumatic experience for many, many people.
40 metres to the west. I want you out of that area. We have a spot fire south at the moment, which has 2 helicopters.
Mountain topography is making things worse. Microclimate becomes more unpredictable and intense.
Overnight, the pattern is that you still get the winds raging overhead, but at the surface, things can change dramatically. So if you are in a valley, for example, you can go from northerly winds to southerly winds overnight because suddenly you get the drainage coming down the mountain.
And where you get gullies or valleys that actually align with the wind direction, you actually get channeling and concentration of those winds. So the wind combined with the convective heat coming from the fire actually add together to accelerate the fire.
And the danger doesn't pass with the fire front. In its wake, survivors find themselves still surrounded by flames.
Even though I put out the fires, everything was still burning. The bush was still burning. All the trees around the house were still burning. So the front had passed, but everything was still alight.
Everything was like Roman candles. Everything. There was nothing you could look at that wasn't glowing like a Roman candle anywhere. And then there's still embers were blowing through because the wind was still blowing.
I'd been tracking it on the Saturday. We were thinking that the wind change as it came through would be exceptionally dangerous for whatever fires were burning, but when I tuned in on Sunday morning, I was speechless to see what had actually happened.
Driving through the disaster area, it was an experience that changed my chemistry, that made me shake.
Now, Gav, it's been quite a horrific morning. Can you give us a bit of a description on the sort of situation on the ground?
What we've seen is like nothing else that you would ever see after a normal bushfire. It has been completely vaporised, and you get to realise that it was impossible to get out for the people because there's massive trees that are downed by the winds. They're all just bending over like a nuclear bomb has gone off. Everything was completely obliterated. It was completely gone. There was no signs of life at all. It wasn't just house after house, it was property after property, then kilometre after kilometre, then town after town. It just went on. And that was the biggest shock to the system of just how widespread this event had taken itself.
Black Saturday's mega fire has consumed 400,000 hectares, an area bigger than Sydney and Melbourne combined. At least 170 people are dead, more than 7,000 left homeless.
We've lost the four houses in here, and the guys have done a remarkable job saving the rest.
Yeah, no.
This is just indescribably awful. This is just indescribably awful.
The country's reminded the destructive power of weather and fire dwarfs any human weapon.
If you compare it to the amount of energy given out by the bomb that was used on Hiroshima in the Second World War, we'd have several hundred atomic bomb equivalents. And if you were able to capture the energy that was released from these fires, it would be enough, if you could turn it into electricity, to drive all the industry and all the domestic electrical use in Victoria for 2 years.
The fire's scale can only really be appreciated from space.
We had reports days later of smoke haze being felt as far inland as like central Queensland, so it went that far. And we got a heap of smoke haze through Melbourne a couple of days later.
It's going to take more than 100 years for a lot of those areas to recover. So in our lifetime, we won't see a lot of those forests in the same condition that they were before these fires. So there's been some very long-term changes taking place.
Although it's Australia's worst firestorm, there's something frighteningly familiar about Black Saturday: the weather.
Why did this one end under such tragic circumstances? It comes down to the frontal systems. During the heat wave, everybody wanted to cool down. We were waiting for the southerly. But like Black Friday and Ash Wednesday, most of the loss of life and property occurred during the change.
We have been through a phenomenal weather and fire event. A natural disaster, probably unprecedented. So you've got all of the ducks lining up in a row to give us an environment that the fire services were surely tested.
But the wind change, we will be under threat of something.
All those meteorological factors we saw, the high temperatures, the low humidities, the strong winds, the available fuel, if any one of those hadn't lined up, the fires wouldn't have been as extreme as we actually saw.
2,029 homes consumed in the fires. 78 townships have suffered loss of life or loss of property. Over 6,200 insurance claims totalling over $800 million.
Black Saturday has caused more destruction than Ash Wednesday in 1983.
The weather has a deadly history in southeastern Australia, as if each generation is doomed to suffer.
The problem with bushfires, severe bushfires across southeastern Australia, is traditionally they've occurred quite some distance apart, usually something like 30 to 40 years. And by that time, the people concerned have forgotten. 2 or 3 new generations have moved into the areas.
In truth, of all Australia's natural disasters, Black Saturday was the best predicted.
We had extreme fire danger forecast for that Saturday. We knew it was coming a long way out.
Yet, despite our forecast technology and minute-by-minute updates, so many people perished. So many communities were lost. Something went fundamentally wrong.
This continent of ours, the driest continent on Earth, maybe we have to think a little bit harder about how we go about preparing and living in this type of environment.
A Royal Commission will attempt to find answers for the tragic loss of life. Those answers are sorely needed because experts say megafires can and will happen again.
I think it's quite likely that we're going to see events like Black Saturday again. History tells us that we're going to have a combination of drought with high winds and dry, hot conditions.
Many experts believe megafires will be bigger and more frequent because our climate is getting hotter.
Now, it does appear that these high-intensity fires are increasing in frequency, and some of the climatologists are telling us that this is a reflection of climate change.
I'm very worried about the future. I happen to be a person who believes that climate change is real and that it's having a very real impact on the nature of the bush and the nature of vegetation in southeastern Australia.
I hope it will never be repeated because it was an absolutely ghastly event. However, I've got to say that unless we control our fuels, it will be repeated.
Weather has always held the power of life and death in Australia. But now the stakes are rising.
We could be heading into worst type of events in terms of the frequency and the types of summers that we're enduring.
What we want to do now is to really get this right. How do we look at the forecast? How do we get people to safety? The bottom line is we've got to save lives when confronted with a similar situation, because one thing we can say with certainty is that this will happen again.